Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to have a quick disclaimer off the top that this episode is about sex education. And so if you have littles around you or children near you while watching or listening to this podcast, please be advised at some of the explicit content that will be discussed. But unfortunately, that explicit content is being taught to our students in public schools. So this is a must listen. This week on Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson.
If you go back just far back as Nazi Germany, you'll discover that in Nazi Germany, the communists there wanted to undermine the culture and the morals. And they literally, at one point, took the children from the parents, took them out to these summer camps, and these kids came back pregnant, sleeping around. They completely undermined the family. Why do they do that? Because the family is the most important structure or institution in a culture. And so when you destroy the family, you can destroy the culture. So I said that the only way to keep a free republic is with a well-educated and moral citizenry that can self-govern. These so-called teacher unions want to undermine our free republic. So they are undermining the sexual morality of our children. They're telling our children, oh, your parents are old fashioned. Oh, they'll tell if your child is in a classroom with a union activist teacher. Now, real teachers will not do this. I want to make it really clear. Mm-hmm. This is real teachers and parents versus so-called teacher unions. This is a fight.
For the second time here recently on this podcast, we are going inside our schools, this time with Rebecca Friedrichs to talk about sex education, what our students are really learning. You will be shocked to hear, or maybe you won't be. Maybe some of you won't be shocked to hear some of this explicit content that is being taught to our nation's youth. She also dives into the teachers' unions and how they got us to where we are today with this curriculum and with these policies and measures that so many of you parents are trying so hard to fight against right now for your kids. And We the Patriots USA right now is also fighting. They are joining forces with parents in Connecticut who we have some new information coming to light with their CRT case. Not only did these parents and their kids allege that they received severe backlash for speaking out against CRT, including alleging that their son, one of them, was sexually assaulted at school for their stance on CRT, but there's also more details coming to light on disgusting sexually explicit material that was being taught to these kids alongside CRT in their school as well. So this is a battle that so many of you are waging right now as parents, or if you're young parents, you are trying to get this information and see how you protect your children once they get into these environments from this information. Rebecca has it all for you. So without further ado, let's dive into this week on Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson, where we are choosing faith and freedom over fear. Freedom is non-negotiable. Mandates, free speech, cancel culture, parental rights. These are real people that have stood up for their freedoms no matter what. Welcome into Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson, presented by We the Patriots USA, helping everyday Americans defend their God-given rights. I am so delighted to be joined by Rebecca Friedrichs, a 28-year former public school teacher, founder of 4 Kids in Country, and author of Standing Up to Goliath. And I want to dive in first, Rebecca. I know you're a fierce advocate for, freedoms from school teachers unions, teachers being able to opt out of the unions. And you say that the current state that we are in right now with our public schools, whether it be from the education side of it to the policies that we have right now with COVID or masks, a lot of it has to do with the teachers unions.
Yes, 100% of it has to do with the teacher unions, if it's a negative. So let me just give a little history lesson to your audience. Our American founders told us very clearly in their writings, the only way to keep a free republic is with a well-educated, moral citizenry that can self-govern. So our founders were very clear that our schools were supposed to be excellent, They were supposed to promote morals, Judeo-Christian culture. We even had the 10 Commandments on the wall, and we were learning from the Bible. And we were supposed to create independent citizens who can self-govern. So what happened was, about 100 years ago, these folks who call themselves teacher unions, I call them so-called teacher unions, they're masquerading as teachers. Some of them may have taught, but they're not speaking for the majority of teachers out there. And they're not really a union. They're actually using teachers and other educators as pawns, standing behind our trusted faces and using our money to push a very radical agenda. So what their goal is to undermine that free republic. So they knew they had to undermine a great education, undermine morals, so then people cannot self-govern. So that's what's going on here. That's the root of it. So the reason I do fight this fiercely is because I see that if we could remove these unions from our schools, we could fix everything overnight. So we have to awaken teachers to help them to understand their union is not their savior or their friend. It's actually undermining them and destroying their profession.
And you say that, some of this, I hear this so often in these interviews that I do, that, there's a silver lining to what's been happening, especially with COVID and things like that. And that, these teachers are starting to wake up and to see what's been happening with the unions.
There is a huge silver lining. It reminds me of that story of Joseph from the scriptures, what you meant for evil, God used for good. That's what's going on with this COVID. I want to tell you, I've been fighting teacher unions since I was a student teacher in 1987. Okay, this has been a long battle. I tried fighting from the inside of the union. I tried everything. They don't want to be reformed, and teachers were not awakening. They just were deceived and really believed the union was there for them and didn't understand that all the problems happening in their classroom, like anti-discipline policies, all of a sudden kids aren't being disciplined and the classroom's a war zone. They don't know the teacher unions were behind that. They don't know their teacher unions were behind this radical sex ed and the critical race theory. So teachers kept trusting the unions. But the beautiful thing that happened with this COVID is the unions refused to protect teachers from mask mandates, vax mandates, and they kept closing down the schools. The teacher unions had a backroom deal with the CDC. CDC is also run by corrupt government unions. So this backroom deal created longer school closures, a lot of harm to students. Good teachers don't want their students harmed. Good teachers want their kids in class learning every day. So teachers finally are awakening. There is this groundswell of teachers. I talk to them daily, and they are preparing their mass union exit. And we pray that more and more join.
And you guys at For Kids and Country, you help teachers opt out of having to join a union because it was mandatory for a very long time.
Yes, we do even more than help them. We actually, not For Kids and Country, but myself and 10 other California teachers, we all brought a lawsuit against the California Teachers Association and the National Education Association. That lawsuit was heard at the US Supreme Court in 2016. Our whole goal was to end forced unionism. Between our case and another case, we achieved that goal. We ended forced unionism for every government employee in the United States of America. So you got to understand, if you're a government employee, it's very likely that you're funding a corrupt government union. Start looking at what do you work for the DMV or the VA? Are you a cop? Are you a firefighter? Are you a teacher? Are you a nurse? Start looking at what your government union is funding. You'll be shocked at what a lot of them are funding. You no longer have to pay them. But the unions, when our case was moving forward, the unions did something called the Friedrichs fix, because the case was called Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association. The Friedrichs fix was to manipulate all of the state houses that they control, and there are many, and to pass bills to make it illegal for employers to tell their employees their new rights, that they're allowed to, don't have to fund the unions anymore. So what we do at For Kids and Country every day is educate government employees, teachers in particular, educators, that they no longer have to pay the unions, that the unions are actually a fox in a hen house. And we walk them through the whole process. We have something on our page called a landing page called Join the Movement. And on that page, we show people how to adopt a teacher to help educate them, because teachers are in the dark. So we need your help adopting them. And then we have a union exit button where these teachers can go directly and get all the help they need, help with opting out, legal help if the unions harass them. We have buttons that empower parents and give them toolkits, buttons that allow parents to join other and teachers to join grassroots groups. And we also have information on what the unions are actually doing with their political agenda. So we educate people on our page, and we call ourselves rainmakers. We bring people the truth so then they can go opt out. And we partner with other organizations to get that opt out work done.
And I think that so many people also too are starting to see that, like you mentioned, these unions are funding these other organizations and these other these other agendas that are out there. A couple of weeks ago, I had on a former teacher who resigned from her post in California because she exposed CRT being taught in her schools. And I feel like all the time we see those sorts of headlines, and we see so many headlines too. And I want to tackle this subject with you about the sex ed being taught in our schools. And I love on your website that it has, for your book, Stand Up to Goliath, a warning, a disclaimer on there that says this book contains sexually explicit subjects that are not appropriate for children, even though kids are learning this stuff in America's public schools. So how did, kind of explain to parents how sex ed even got introduced into our schools and how it is not what we experienced when we were in school.
Yes, it's almost unbelievable. So again, a little history lesson, parents and teachers. If you go back just far back as Nazi Germany, you'll discover that in Nazi Germany, the communists there wanted to undermine the culture and the morals. And they literally at one point took the children from the parents, took them out to these summer camps, and these kids came back pregnant, sleeping around. They completely undermine the family. Why do they do that? Because the family is the what's the word I want? Like the most important structure or institution in a culture. And so when you destroy the family, you can destroy the culture. So I said that the only way to keep a free republic is with a well-educated and moral citizenry that can self-govern. These so-called teacher unions want to undermine our free republic. So they are undermining the sexual morality of our children. They're telling our children, oh, your parents are old fashioned. Oh, they'll tell if your child is in a classroom with a union activist teacher. Now, real teachers will not do this. I want to make it really clear. Mm-hmm. This is real teachers and parents versus so-called teacher unions. This is a fight. And the real teachers, which is the majority of teachers, would never sexualize a child, never teach critical race theory, never tell a child to disobey their parent, never keep a child's gender secret, never, ever, ever. Real teachers partner with parents in what I call the education triangle. So now that that's out of the way, what's going on with these activist teachers who they have a loud voice because the teacher unions control the narrative and they promote the voice of these very nasty teachers. And what happened was the unions helped put lots of different people into office, and their chosen politicians push the laws and bills that the teacher unions want. So one of those ones was comprehensive sexuality education. And they always pass these things with really nice sounding words. It's very Orwellian. Here in California, it's called the California Healthy Youth Act. But when you read it, and then when you read the 6 curricula that were passed by our State House and by our State Department of Education, all run by the teacher unions or controlled by the teacher unions, you read it and you go, oh, there's nothing healthy about this content. In fact, some of it's pornographic. And so what the unions and their friends did was they wrote into the law that if teachers are unqualified to teach this, then the experts will be brought in to teach the content. So what's happening, parents, you have to be aware. Great teachers are saying, I'll never teach this. This is child abuse. So they're just set aside, and Planned Parenthood is brought into the classroom to teach the content. Planned Parenthood has contracts with districts all over the country. This is scandalous. This is 100% wrong. It's not what our founders had in mind. Our schools were supposed to be small, little community, run by the community, neighborhood schools, little home schools, little pods, run by good teachers and parents working together. We were never supposed to have any special interest groups like the unions and the ACLU and Southern Poverty Law Center and Planned Parenthood. Never should have been there. And the government was not supposed to get involved or tell us what to teach or how to teach. So that's what's happened, is our whole system's been flipped on its head. And the goal is the destruction of our republic and of families. So I always tell people, the schoolhouse is on fire. The children and the teachers are inside. We cannot put out the fire while they're in there burning. We need to rescue them out, put out the fire, restore our schools. How do we put out the fire? We get the unions out and their special interest friends out, and we restore.
And we've started to see those first steps of restoration because, once again, this was brought up in my podcast about CRT, is that COVID and online learning exposed to these parents what was being taught to their kids, because so many would have probably said to you, there's no way that Planned Parenthood is, pushing sex ed curriculum at my children's school, until they started to see it firsthand. And I wanted to bring up a story, some headlines that just came out this past week. The Daily Mail posted this article that students at a middle school in Connecticut recently received the pizza and consent assignment, which asked 8th grade students to list their favorite pizza toppings and use those as a metaphor for their favorite sexual acts. And, again, I'm going to put a disclaimer on this podcast because little kids should not be listening to this, but that's what 8th graders are being asked to do, is sexualize and talk about this in school.
Yeah. So groomers know this, sexual groomers know this, that if you get to children with sexual content, you create sex addicts. That's what's going on here. This is pitiful, disgusting, and scandalous. And we need to hold people accountable. We need justice. We need fathers to step up. Please, fathers. I know women emasculated you years ago and told you that you're not allowed to stand up. Stand up. We need you, fathers. We need you so desperately. We do have a lot of dads in the fight. So I want to just address, if you don't mind, some of the things they're teaching, because what you just told me, sadly, didn't shock me, because I've seen it all. And it's increasingly worse every day. We have to stop this. Yesterday. So the first time I found out about the sex ed was in 2013. I received an email from a mother in Northern California. The email was titled "The Latest Horror." And she described that her 5th grade daughter, okay, that's an 11-year-old, that her class, her teacher was using or maybe it was Planned Parenthood, I don't know. The mother just found out that this was being used in the class. And it was a curricula written by Planned Parenthood called Making Proud Choices. And one of the lessons was called the condom relay races. And in that lesson, the teacher is told to separate the children into 2 different teams, and that boys and girls have to be mixed together, because thanks to the teacher unions and their friends, we can no longer assume gender. And they claim that there are not 2 genders. God says there's 2 genders. Sorry, teacher unions, you're wrong. There's 2 genders. But they claim there's a never-ending spectrum of genders. So they say you can't assume a child's gender, boys and girls together. That's all part of the grooming. So the teacher's supposed to put the kids in 2 lines, and the teacher's literally told in writing to set out 2 anatomically correct, fully erect adult male penis models to give the kids condoms. And now they're going to play a relay race, putting condoms on and off. And they have to state all the steps on how to use them. And the book literally, the curricula literally says, if a child misses a step, make the child go back and repeat it. When I read this, I was fuming. I had to pace my house because I couldn't believe the child abuse going on. The 6 curricula that were adopted by the state of California are all equally abusive. I've read them all. And it's just unreal what's going on, what's been snuck in under parents' noses. And what the unions and their friends do is they write the laws to make it illegal for a school district to be fully transparent and to say, parents, here's the whole curricula. Here's every video connected. Here's every book connected. You look at it, you decide if you want your child to do this, and then opt in. Well, they make that against the law because they know 100% of parents would say, I don't want to opt in. So instead, they make it this opt out where the parent has to find, if the child brings the letter home stuffed at the bottom of the backpack or in the bottom of 100 papers on registration day or whatever, Most parents never see the opt-out form. And even if they do see it, the form doesn't tell them all this horrific, sexually explicit content that is in the curricula. So most parents, they're just thinking, hey, this is what I learned. It's the birds and the bees, and they're going to separate the boys and the girls, learn about our bodies. That's not what it is. Be warned, parents. Do not let your child participate in any of this. And the problem is, any teacher can bring it up in any subject area without warning you. So you cannot protect your child in these public schools. And sadly, this is also getting into some private and charter schools. So you really have to be diligent and pull your kids out of these schools. Do something different. If you need help, we can help you with that at forkidsinCountry.org. We have all sorts of school alternatives, another group we partner with. So please let us help you to rescue your kids from this danger.
I think that's, and I want to back up and re-highlight that, because I think so many parents aren't aware that they can opt their children out of sex ed in the school. So can you explain that process and how they can do that?
Sure. If they come to our website forkidsinCountry.org, under the sex ed tab, we actually have an opt-out letter that they can use. It was written by a lawyer, a Pacific Justice Institute, and he's given us permission to post that. People can use that. But I'll repeat the warning. That's only going to get them out of the biological portion of the letter of the lessons. Some kindergarten teacher talking about transgenderism and having a kid say, I used to be a boy and now I'm a girl, in class in front of the kids. You can't protect your kids from that. You can't opt out of that. That can be happening anywhere at all times. And the public school culture has been fully corrupted. So I know a lot of great teachers. I was a hardworking, great teacher, but we were trapped in a corrupt culture because the unions have corrupted the schools. So if there's a union in your school, or if your school's in any way controlled by the unions, or has a contract with Planned Parenthood, or ACLU's involved, or Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, or any of these things, if they're using the language of the left, of the far left, like equity and inclusion and safe schools, and instead of saying critical race theory, they might say social emotional learning. There's so many different terms they use that are warning signs for you to get your child out of that school. Children should be in school to learn how to read and write and do arithmetic well. They should, our schools were so amazing when our country was first founded. Our kids were learning Greek and Latin. They were learning critical thinking through the Socratic method. They were reading the scriptures, and these unions came in and they've undermined the whole thing. Get your kid into a great school, homeschool, or come to our site. On our Join the Movement page, you can see a button that says school options. If you click on that, we will lead you to, there are dozens of different options for you, and we can help you to get connected into those options through our partner organization, Public School Exit.
If all this isn't getting you fired up, I don't know what does. We're taking a quick break right now to encourage you to head over to givesendgo.com/fightcrt. We the Patriots USA is raising money right now to help these parents and kids that are standing up to CRT in their Connecticut school, that they allege they received severe emotional and physical backlash, including alleged sexual abuse. They also were trying to combat some sexually explicit material and curriculum that was being taught in their schools. So if all this is firing you up, you have a chance to make a difference. Any little donation or big donation makes a huge difference. So head over to givesendgo.com/fightcrt. You can also head to wethepatriotsusa.org to learn more. I love how you hit the core of that, because I myself, I'm a public school kid. I am a product of the public schools, public university as well. And, my grandfather was a public school teacher. My mom was a substitute teacher. My dad served on the school board as a school board president for more than 10 years. So, my roots are in public school system, but just what myself and so many people have been seeing. And you mentioned how they are not transparent on that curriculum. So it makes you wonder that pizza toppings, sexual innuendo assignment that I mentioned that happened in Connecticut, that was posted to the school's website. So if they're freely sharing information like that, what are they not sharing with parents?
Oh my goodness. I would need hours to share with you all of the disgusting, sexually explicit grooming material that is available to teachers. These are activists. They're not real teachers. Real teachers would never do this, but there's so much available to them. I'll tell you a couple of tools where people can find a little bit more. First of all, I wrote a book called Standing Up to Goliath. In that book, I have 3 chapters on the sex ed, so they can learn a lot of details about how this is done. Second tool is we actually are just releasing a movie on March 14th, releasing a movie called Whose Children Are They? And people can find that at whosechildrenarethey.com. And in the movie, we're actually exposing some of the sex ed content and some of the videos that are used to groom our children. It is unbelievable. So what happens is these different sex ed curricula are adopted in my case, in the state of California. They originally adopted 6 curricula. One was the Planned Parenthood, and then several others, Teen Talk and different curricula. So when you start digging in as a teacher, you notice that none of them are written by trusted publishing houses that have been writing for schools for years and years and years. They're all written by these organizations we've never heard of, or like Planned Parenthood. So that's the first thing. The second thing we've noticed in my own school district, a very large district in Southern California, there was a lot of confusion around the adoption of the sex ed. They started training the teachers and showing them the penis models and all this stuff. And within 10 minutes, my teacher friend said, whoa, 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 we're not teaching this. Where's the parent letter? And what they found out was the school board had never even approved the curricula. There had never been, what schools do is they practice a curricula for a year, maybe in 1 or 2 or 3 classrooms to see if it's any good before they go through an adoption process. That never happened. The school district, the committee never met to approve this curricula. It was just snuck in. And it was all done by the so-called teacher unions and the people they put in place into different jobs. And so everybody was freaking out about this curricula, and the teachers wouldn't teach it, but the experts can come in. It's still there. We've been exposing it ever since. And what's really troubling is when you dig deep into these curricula, you find materials that are recommended to teachers. Some of those materials are books, and they are full of graphic sexual content, including things like teaching boys how to measure their penises together or how to masturbate each other. Talks about fisting. I mean, just why would you ever talk to this about a child? If we did this in public, we would be registered sex offenders, but in the schools, it's okay all of a sudden. So it's this kind of content. And then there's these video links that are available to these teachers. And one of them is called Amaze Videos, amaze.org, I think it is. I just ask your viewers to go check out amaze.org. I don't need to say another word. Once you see a few of those videos, your jaw will drop on the ground and you will realize this is not what you want for your children. And this is not what good teachers want. Good teachers, your teacher union is behind bringing all this stuff in, funding all kinds of nightmares, working with Planned Parenthood, giving your dues to support things like abortion, things you're against, harming the children. Stop funding them, please. You don't have to fund these unions, and you don't have to be afraid anymore. We'll stand with you. We know teachers all around the country. We can connect you with them. Come to our page for kidsandcountry.org and click on Join the Movement. Get in there and union exit and reach out to us, and we'll connect you to some other teachers, because it's desperate. We need to save our kids. And really, teachers and parents standing together can save America. We can save our schools, especially if teachers will get out of the unions. Oh, and one more thing. The unions corrupted the PTA. So if you're paying the PTA parents, you're funding the same agenda. There's a whole chapter about it in my book, and I have a friend who wrote a whole book on it. So, and I linked to her book in my book. So get educated on what's going on. You can do that through my book, Standing Up to Goliath, so easily. I even put it on audio if you don't have time to read. And then, of course, our movie coming out on March 14th. So get educated, because it really is a nightmare out there in our schools, but we can stop it, and we can stop it fast if we get the unions and their friends out.
Are you starting to notice a shift away from the unions as well because of what happened. I thought it was interesting during COVID when you had some of these politicians that were for very strict public COVID measures, but were still, up in Chicago, they were still headbutting on the teachers union, still wanted to keep the kids out of the schools. And even these politicians that were all for very strict public COVID measures were having issues with these teachers unions. They're like, listen, we agree, we want everybody to mask, we want all of this and this and this, but like we think the kids need to be at least remote learning or back in the classrooms. And Chicago was a prime example of that, on how they were, these teachers. Is it the unions that are powering that, or have we seen also a shift in who are our teachers nowadays? Because at that same time, you were seeing teachers posting photos of themselves, in Mexico and such on vacation, while they were saying, no, we can't teach our kids anymore.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is it's both. The teacher unions, over a 35-year period, the National Education Association did 3 surveys. And that's in my book too. They, and in this 35-year length, 3 surveys, they discovered that the majority of teachers are conservative. They discovered that only 12 to 13% of teachers are decisively liberal. And they used the term liberal, not leftist. If they would have used leftist, I think the number would have been even smaller. So the truth is that the majority of teachers are center right. They're conservative people, which makes sense. They love children. They want to protect children. Most of the teachers I worked with were people of faith. They're just good, honest people who, we call each other Mr. and Mrs. and everything's about manners and, do unto others as you have them do unto you, and honor your parents. That's how teachers think, real teachers think. So 2 things have happened. First thing is that teacher you saw, posting her thing that she's laying on the beach, and that's disgusting to real teachers. How dare she, number one. But that's the teacher that gets a voice. So the teacher unions control the media. I was on I don't remember what show it was on, but Media Matters took my interview, twisted it up, made me look crazy, all this other stuff. Well, the teacher unions give money to Media Matters. So what's going on here is that the teacher unions are part of that whole leftist controlled media. They're part of all the talking points and all of that. So when teachers behave badly, they're promoted by the unions. A teacher like me, who's been pushing back on the unions since my first year of teaching, when I was 23 years old, I've never been given a voice. I didn't get a voice until I brought a lawsuit against them. And even then, I'm telling you, we had a PR firm for our lawsuit. The media on the left would not interview me. CNN never interviewed me. I'd have been happy to talk to them. MSNBC never interviewed me. They just silence people like me. They're not telling the truth. They're silencing truth tellers like me and promoting the union narrative. That's why it seems like there's so many bad teachers. When a big mob of teachers, 1,500 teachers last week in Douglas County, Colorado, went out supposedly marching against what parents want. Here's the truth. There's a few mean activists in the crowd who are leading the whole thing. And the rest of the teachers are terrified and have been either manipulated or terrified or told they're going to lose their job or whatever if they're not out there marching. But those teachers don't get a voice. I have teacher friends who served at the National Education Association level as representatives, and they tried to push back on this radical sex ed 35 years ago. And they kept pushing back till today. Here's what happened to them. They were barred from committees. They were spit upon by union leaders. They were blocked from going up to the podium to speak their mind. They'd go up to share something, we disagree with this new business item. They'd be shut down. I have one friend who went up to the podium to speak against the unions wanting to tax businesses at like 90% or something like that. And he went up to say, we don't agree with this. The union activists had big posters and they put one in front of his face that had a sad face or a boo or whatever, and the whole crowd booed him. That's how they treat good teachers. This is far less than 1% of the teachers around the country are part of these unions, are these activists, but they have this massive blowhorn voice. And the rest of us have just been brutalized and silenced for decades. So that's why For Kids and Country is working so hard to get our voice out. And we're so appreciative of you to help us get our voice out to your listeners, because people need to realize it's real teachers versus so-called teacher unions. And we need to get just hordes of people standing with good teachers, adopting good teachers and giving them a voice, and silencing these nasty unions and telling them, no, we have the majoritarian values. We are the majority. You will be silenced.
Can you also give parents some advice too for what to do to enact change themselves and what's happening in their schools? That's a great message for teachers, and parents should come alongside these teachers to help them break away from the unions. But, we see so often parents going to school board meetings, wanting to get their kids out of mass, or, talking about this different curriculum, whether it's sex ed or CRT or just anything that these parents are fighting back for and standing up for right now. And they are getting nowhere with their school boards. We are starting to see some school board officials being recalled. What are some different areas of advice that you have for these parents?
So I'd like to take a couple angles on that. First of all, parents, the reason why you're not getting anywhere is because that nasty school board is controlled by the so-called teacher unions. So the teacher unions pour millions and millions into local school board races, which I think should be illegal. You shouldn't be able to spend more than a few $100 on a local school board race. But this is what's going on. So, and I have personal friends who've run for school board in all sorts of even conservative areas, and they get shut down by the teacher unions who pour all this money and all these resources. The union candidates never even have to go door to door. The union does everything for them. And these other candidates on our side are working hard and raising their kids and working all these hours, and then they lose to the teacher union candidate. So the first thing parents can do is recognize that you're not going to get anywhere with a school board like that. They're corrupted. They are there doing the bidding of the teacher union, and they don't care about you. So you got to get them out of office. Now, one of the best ways to get them out of office is to get good people in your community to run as a slate, 2 or 3 people running together to beat the unions and to take their place. The problem is, especially if you read my book, you'll read a couple stories where people did this, and then the unions sent organizers from Chicago all the way to Colorado to undermine these brand new school board members and to picket against them for 1.5 years and chase them off the board. This is the kind of mafia tactics the unions use. And so you have to be aware you are up against a very brutal organization called teacher unions. So that's why my number one goal is to get teachers to stop funding unions. They don't have to fund unions anymore. And if teachers stand together and 50% plus one teacher votes to decertify the union has to leave. So if parents and teachers can stand together, you can get these corrupt boards out and get the unions out so you could stop fighting this massive nightmare. Now, other than that, of course, parents need to run for school board. You need to work with your community. The problem on our side is we hardly ever get any money for our school board candidates. So you need to stand together, help them raise money, run as a slate, get all kinds of voices behind these folks, write op-eds for them, go door to door for them. They need help because the union's giving a ton of help to their side. Work on election integrity. There is so much election fraud out there. Think about it. The so-called unions control the DMV. The DMV is where we do our voter registration. Maybe that's corrupted too. The post office is unionized by a government union. They're delivering the ballots. And we heard about all these ballots that were delivered from New York to Pennsylvania or something. The problems are so deep. But what you have to remember is the union is the root of these problems. So that's why I focus there. Another thing parents can do, get your kids out of these schools. If you have a bad school board, why you have the authority. God gave you the authority to raise and educate your child. It's not parents are going in and begging these school boards. I mean, I appreciate parents fighting, but you're begging a school board who is then saying no way and then abusing your child. Pull your child out, pull them out, fight for, for lower taxes so that we're not all funding these horrible school system. And so we all have more money to educate our own children. So there's a ton of different answers to the question. And as I said before, if they go to forkidsincountry.org and look at our Join the Movement page, there's a lot of answers they can find there too.
And school choice is another big topic too that's out there that could be helpful for parents as well.
Yes. And my only thing, I definitely fight for school choice. I agree. The only thing we have to be aware of is if we get all the school choice we want, but the unions are still controlling our politicians and our schools, they will very soon pass a law to make it that, oh, your private school's getting government funding. Now your private school has to teach critical race theory and all this sex ed. And oh, homeschoolers, oh, if you want, you can't homeschool anymore. Or if you want to have government money, you have to teach all this. That's the danger. Our founders, our American founders, never, ever dreamed that the federal, state, or county government would be pouring money into schools or paying for curricula or choosing curricula. So we have to think differently. School choice is a short-term support that has helped a lot of kids, but it can be corrupted. So we have to think differently. We have to get back to what our schools are supposed to be. No government. If I had my dream, there'd be no National Department of Education, no state, no county Department of Ed. They're corrupted. The teacher unions put Jimmy Carter into office, and his thank you gift was the National Department of Education with a cabinet level position of Secretary of Education. Our founders never dreamed that would happen, and it's all corrupted. So we just have to think differently. We shouldn't be thinking that the government is going to educate our kids. No, we educate our kids. So let's fight for lower taxes. Look, we pay so much in property taxes and it goes to all these corrupt schools. Why don't we just not pay those huge property taxes? Let's change that and then educate our own kids.
I know. I think that's so great. A, free market system always seems to prevail, and B, I think that's a big mental hurdle for parents. They're like, I'm paying all this money in taxes for this public school right here in my backyard, but yet if I want to pull them out, I have to either pay for a private school or homeschool them. And I think that it's so wonderful that there's people like you out there that are telling parents, you can do it, whatever route that is for you, whether it's homeschooling or a different school, that can happen. Because would you say that public schools are too far gone, or do you think that there can be something done at this point?
If we can get the unions out, we could fix them. Yes.
Yep.
As long as the unions and their pals stay, if the unions and Planned Parenthood and ACLU are going to run our schools, they're fully corrupted. There's no way to fix them. So if we can get them out, yes, we can fix them. But I want to go back to something you said about parents, encouraging parents. Parents, did you know that the so-called teacher unions for years have been putting out messaging to make you think that you're too stupid to educate your own child? To make you think that the experts have to do it? Let me tell you something. There's a lot of non-experts in our schools. They call themselves experts. They have no idea what they're doing. They're harming your kids. You, parent, you are the best educator for your child. I don't care if you speak a different language than English here in this country. You are the best educator for your child. Educating a child is not rocket science. There are very tried and true methods like phonics that our public schools have removed. And our public schools are causing dyslexia all over the place because they removed phonics. A parent, let's say you speak Spanish and you're an American, you want your child to learn English. Start doing phonics together. You'll learn the English, you'll learn how to read, and so will your child. So parents, take authority. You are the expert on your child. You are the only one that knows what's best for your child. You can do it. And like we were just saying, there are so many options. Come to forkidsandscountry.org and click on that, join our movement to get to that page. And the button says school options. There are at least 24 school options. Most people think it's just private school, public school, homeschool. No, there's so many options for you. Some of them are very affordable. And teachers, there's options for you too. And there's options where you can make more money outside of the public school. So don't think that your pension and what the unions of pay they've gotten for you is the end all. No, there are shinier places to go where you won't be funding politics and where you won't feel like you have PTSD after being at work all day. So there's hope for everybody.
I love that. That's such a great message. And I, as a new mom, I have an 18-month-old and we're getting ready to welcome our second child. I'm learning too about all of these different options for kids as well. Co-ops where you're part-time homeschool, part-time in school. There's just so many great options. And my teacher friends too, that, my friends of mine that are teachers that have stepped away from the public school system, they're reinventing their careers as teachers. So it really is an exciting time for everyone to reinvent themselves moving forward. So I appreciate your message. I appreciate all you're doing. We also have to get you connected with my organization, We the Patriots USA, because they are helping out right now. They have a CRT case in Connecticut where they're helping out some parents and students that receive some just horrific backlash. One of their sons, they allege, suffered sexual abuse at school for speaking out against CRT. They also had some grievous sex ed that was taught to them in school as well that they're addressing. So I know you have people that come to you guys all the time. So put those resources out there for everyone. Once again, tell them where they can go.
Sure, they can come to us at forkidsandcountry.org. The most important thing to click on is join the movement. There's a slider, join the movement, and take you to that landing page. Everything pretty much you need is on the buttons on that page. We also have a menu item all about the sex ed and can help with that. And I'm thrilled that your organization is helping these parents. Connecticut has been a big mess for a long time. And I'd like to note that Biden chose his Secretary of Education out of Connecticut. And Connecticut, California, New York, Washington, these two sides of the country, there's just a lot of this going on. So I'm not surprised, but again, we can stop it if parents and teachers will take authority again. So just really thrilled about the momentum we have and hope more will join us.
Rebecca was such a wonderful resource to have on this podcast. She is so knowledgeable. I'm sure you've seen her before as she makes her various media rounds on really any topic on education that comes forth in the news cycle. She is a fierce warrior, a 28-year teaching veteran. She has seen it all. And so I love that closing message that she has for all of you parents. You can do it. Take charge. You have rights. You are the one who God has ordained to raise up your little children. And I, am experiencing that now as a new mom and going to be a mother of two here soon. So this really hits home with me as well. And I just encourage you to not only head over to the resources that Rebecca mentioned, we will put those in the show notes, but also head over to wethepatriotsusa.org as they're fighting for parental rights and for our kids each and every day. And I am just so encouraged by the messages that I get from you moms and dads and parents that are, so many of you reached out to me after our CRT episode, and I love to hear from you after this episode as well. So make sure to follow me on Telegram at Teryn Gregson, or Instagram is another good place to find me, and subscribe to our channel wherever you are watching this right now so you don't miss a video. And we encourage you to head over to Rumble and places like that because YouTube keeps taking our videos down. So thank you so much for joining us this week on Faithful Freedom with Teryn Gregson, presented by We the Patriots USA.